There is a specific, profound danger in underestimating a quiet man. People look at calloused hands, faded work boots, and a worn-out utility jacket, and they make instant calculations. They assume a lack of ambition. They assume a lack of intellect. Most dangerously, they assume a lack of power. For 15 years, I let them assume whatever they wanted. It was safer that way. My name is Robert Mitchell. I am 62 years old, and to the wealthy residents of Portland, Oregon, I am nothing more than a reliable, reasonably priced independent contractor. A handyman. The guy you call when your custom mahogany deck needs sealing or your imported Italian plumbing fixtures spring a leak. But before I started fixing broken pipes, I spent 22 years dismantling human infrastructure for the United States government. Joint Special Operations Command, Black Ops Intelligence, Tactical Interrogation, and Strategic Asset Neutralization. When my wife died, I left that world behind. I traded my tactical gear for a tool belt to raise my two daughters, Sarah and Emma, in the quietest, most unremarkable way possible. The only person who knew the full extent of my past was my mother, Catherine Mitchell. And 3 days ago, I buried her. The funeral was a small, dignified affair. A gray, rain-slicked Tuesday morning that mirrored the hollow emptiness in my chest. My mother was 84. A retired nurse who had spent the last 2 decades volunteering at the local library and tending to her prize-winning hydrangeas. Or so I thought. The official cause of death was sudden heart failure in her sleep. Peaceful, painless, routine. As I stood by her grave watching the casket being lowered, a shadow fell over me. Dr. William Hayes, he was my mother's primary care physician and my own doctor for the past 15 years. He was the epitome of Portland elite silver hair, perfectly styled, wearing a bespoke Brioni suit that cost more than my work truck, and exuding an aura of arrogant superiority that always set my teeth on edge. Robert, Hayes said, his voice a smooth, practiced purr of fake sympathy. He didn't offer his hand. He never did. He probably didn't want to risk touching the grease permanently embedded in my cuticles. My deepest condolences. Catherine was a wonderful woman, stubborn, but wonderful, thank you. Dr. Hayes, I replied, my voice rough. My head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that had become my constant companion over the last few years. Hayes looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my off-the-rack funeral suit. A faint, contemptuous smirk played at the corner of his mouth. It's a shame she didn't live to see you expand that little repair business of yours. But then again, a man must know his limitations, mustn't he? We can't all be meant for greatness. If you ever need help with the financial arrangements for the medical bills, let my office know. We have charity protocols for low-income families. He didn't wait for an answer. He just turned on his Italian leather heel and walked away, adjusting his silk tie. I watched him go, a cold flicker of instinct flaring in the back of my fogged mind. I pushed it down. I was a civilian now, a grieving son with a headache. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the plastic bottle of prescription pills. Lorazepam. Hayes had prescribed it to me 2 years ago for delayed trauma responses and anxiety. It kept me calm. It kept me docile. It kept the memories of my old life comfortably suppressed. Sarah and Emma flanked me, each taking one of my arms. Sarah, 36, was a cutthroat corporate litigator in Seattle, a woman who ate hostile witnesses for breakfast. Emma, 32, was a senior cybersecurity architect in San Francisco, capable of penetrating server mainframes that governments claimed were unhackable. They were my greatest achievements. I hate that guy, Sarah whispered, her eyes narrowing as she watched Hayes's Mercedes pull out of the cemetery. He always looks at you like you're something he stepped in. Let it go, Sarah, I muttered, rubbing my temples. He's just an arrogant doctor. That afternoon, we were supposed to begin the grim, standard procedure of sorting through my mother's belongings. But at 3 p.m., my phone rang. It was David Krause, my mother's attorney. He had handled her modest estate planning for 3 decades. But when I answered, his voice didn't sound like a man discussing a modest estate. He sounded terrified. Robert, are Sarah and Emma still in town? Krause asked, his breath hitching slightly. Yes, David, we're at the house. Why? There is a clause in your mother's will, a sealed addendum. She left explicit instructions that it only be opened after her death, and only in the physical presence of you and both of your daughters. No exceptions. What kind of addendum? I asked. the fog in my brain parting just a fraction. I cannot discuss it over the phone. You need to come to my office right now, all three of you. An hour later, we were sitting in Krauss's downtown office. The heavy oak door was locked. Krauss, a usually unflappable man of 70, looked as though he hadn't slept in a week. He placed a thick, sealed manila envelope in the center of his desk. My mother's elegant handwriting scrawled across the front, to be opened only after my death, in the presence of Robert, Sarah, and Emma. Do not let Robert see this alone. Before I open this, Krauss said, his voice trembling, I need you to understand something. Your mother came to me 6 months ago. She handed me this envelope and told me that if she died suddenly, I was to deliver this immediately. She said that if anything happened to her before the truth came out, you three would need each other. Sarah leaned forward, her litigator instincts kicking in. Mr. Krauss, was my grandmother in danger? Did she receive threats? I don't know, Sarah, Krauss admitted, taking a deep breath. But she left me a second envelope, instructions for myself. If Robert tries to investigate alone, I am to stop him. If Dr. William Hayes contacts me asking about her belongings, I am to call the FBI immediately. The name hit the room like a concussive grenade. Dr. Hayes? Emma repeated, her eyes widening. Why would Grandma mention Dr. Hayes? Krauss broke the heavy wax seal on the envelope. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, dated March 15th, precisely 6 months before her death. He cleared his throat and began to read aloud. My dearest Robert, Sarah, and Emma, if you are reading this, I am gone, and there is a truth I have kept hidden from you for 29 years. Something that will shatter your understanding of our family. I am sorry for the lies. I am sorry for the deception, but everything I did to protect you, Robert. Especially you. You were never supposed to know the truth about Margaret. Margaret Caldwell. My mother's best friend from nursing school, the woman who had mysteriously vanished in the summer of 1995. Her car found abandoned by Trillium Lake. The police had ruled it a probable suicide due to severe depression. I remembered Margaret as a kind, gentle woman. I also remembered the devastating toll her death took on my mother. Krauss continued reading. Margaret did not commit suicide. She was murdered, and I have spent the last 29 years collecting the evidence to prove who killed her and to protect you from suffering the exact same fate. The room was dead silent. I could hear my own pulse drumming in my ears. There is a storage unit in Beaverton. Unit 127 at Secure Space. The key is in my safety deposit box at Wells Fargo. Inside that unit is my life's work, files, financial records, hard drives, and proof. Robert, you must go there. But you must not go alone. Take the girls. And Robert, listen to me very carefully. Do not trust your doctor. Do not trust William Hayes. He is not who you think he is. With all my love. Mom. Krauss slowly lowered the paper. Nobody spoke. The air conditioning hummed, a low, mechanical drone that felt deafening. What the hell does she mean? She spent 29 years collecting evidence. Sarah finally broke the silence, her voice razor sharp. Grandma was a retired nurse who baked cookies and read romance novels. Krauss reached into his desk drawer. Actually, Sarah, she wasn't. After Margaret disappeared, your grandmother went back to school. She got her private investigator's license in 1997. She was one of the most meticulous, ruthless shadow investigators in the state. She specialized in corporate espionage and background checks. But she only did that to fund her real work. She spent nearly 3 decades investigating one single target. I stared at the lawyer, the pieces of my reality fracturing and rearranging themselves into a terrifying new picture. She was investigating Dr. Hayes? Yes, Krauss said grimly. And whatever she found, Robert, I believe it got her killed. We drove to the secure space storage facility in Beaverton in suffocating silence. Emma sat in the passenger seat, rapidly typing on her laptop, already running background queries on Dr. William Hayes. I sat in the back, staring out the window, trying to process the tectonic plates of my reality shifting beneath me. My mother, for nearly 3 decades, she had been a shadow operative, hunting a monster hiding in plain sight. Unit 127 was on the 2nd floor. Inside was a time capsule of obsession. The walls were lined with heavy steel filing cabinets, each drawer meticulously labeled in my mother's neat handwriting. Margaret Caldwell, timeline 1995, William Hayes, offshore accounts, victim statements, On the desk was a USB drive with a sticky note. "Robert, watch this first." Emma plugged it in. "It's an encrypted video file. The password hint is your real anniversary, August 14th, I said. "The day I enlisted in the military. My mother knew me better than anyone." The video played. My mother's face filled the screen. The timestamp read April 2nd, 2024, 5 months before her death. She looked exhausted, but her gaze was fierce. "Robert," her recorded voice echoed, "if you are watching this, I am dead. Everything I am about to tell you will hurt. But believe me when I say that every choice I made to keep you alive." Sarah grabbed my hand. "In July 1995, Margaret Caldwell discovered a horror," my mother continued. "She was volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. One of the women confided in Margaret. She said she had been drugged and assaulted by a prominent local physician. Margaret found 3 more women with the exact same story. The exact same doctor, Dr. William Hayes. The air in the storage unit felt instantly heavy. "Margaret brought the evidence to me," my mother said. "She had medical records and testimonies. She was going to go to the police. I begged her to wait, to build an airtight case, but she was too angry. She confronted Hayes directly. He killed her that very night. He drugged her, drove her car to Trillium Lake, and staged it as a tragic suicide. I knew the truth, but the evidence vanished from her house." My mother leaned closer to the camera. "So I started over. I spent 29 years tracking his every move. I found 17 victims. 17 women he drugged, assaulted, and systematically discredited. I have it all now. Bank records showing hush money, audio recordings of him gaslighting victims, forensic details from Margaret's autopsy the police overlooked. I have enough to put him away forever." My mother looked down at her hands. "But I have evidence of something else. Robert, in 1995, you had just retired from JSOC. You were a security consultant for the hospital. Margaret had told you what she found. You were going to use your intelligence clearance to blow the whistle on him. Hayes found out." My vision blurred. A sharp pain spiked in my temple. "Hayes came to our house. He slipped a military-grade neuroinhibitor into your coffee. Not enough to kill you, just enough to target your short-term memory centers. He then graciously took over your medical care, diagnosing you with extreme PTSD for 6 months. He kept you heavily medicated. He wiped your memory of the investigation. I couldn't breathe, the fog in my brain. It wasn't the war. It was him. I couldn't prove it without risking your life." My mother's voice broke. "If Hayes knew we suspected him, he would have killed you, Robert. So I did something terrible. I let him keep you medicated. I allowed him to prescribe those anxiety pills. They were low-dose cognitive suppressants to keep your tactical mind dull, to keep you docile. I stole your edge, Robert. I stole your memories, but I kept you alive." Sarah was weeping. Emma's face was a mask of fury. "Take this evidence to Detective James Park. He is the only one you can trust. But be careful. Hayes knows I was closing in. If I am dead, Robert William Hayes murdered me. Avenge Margaret. Avenge those 17 women. Avenge me. But do not let him know that you are awake." The video cut to black. We sat in silence. "Dad?" Emma asked softly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the plastic bottle of lorazepam. For 15 years, William Hayes thought he had neutered a JSOC operative with a prescription pad. He thought he had won. I unscrewed the cap, walked to a sink in the corner, and poured the entire contents down the drain. The fog that had clouded my mind for nearly 30 years began to burn off, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. "Dad," Sarah said, "we're calling Detective Park right now." "No," I said. My voice sounded like scraping steel. "If we hand this to the police now, Hayes will hire elite defense attorneys. He'll drag it out in court for a decade." I looked at my daughters. "Dr. Hayes thinks I am a fool. We are going to let him keep thinking that, right up until the moment I tear his entire world apart. Emma, I need you to bypass his secure servers. I want his financial offshore routing numbers, his personal emails, and his private medical logs. I want his entire digital footprint ready to be dumped to the FBI. Consider him hacked." "Dad," Emma smiled. "Sarah, I need airtight legal traps, asset freeze requests, and civil litigation suits on behalf of all 17 victims." Sarah nodded. "I'll have the injunctions pre-filed under seal by midnight." "Good," I said, cracking my knuckles. "I am going to make an appointment with my doctor." The next 48 hours were a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare, orchestrated from the dusty confines of Secure Space Unit 127. The withdrawal symptoms from the cognitive suppressants hit me by the second morning. My hands developed a fine, persistent tremor, cold sweat soaked through my shirt, and my head felt like it was trapped in a hydraulic press. But beneath the physical agony, my mind was a high-performance engine that had finally been unchained. For 15 years, I had been operating in a heavily medicated twilight. Now, every tactical protocol, every interrogation technique, and every covert infiltration strategy I had mastered in JSOC flooded back into my consciousness with terrifying clarity. Emma had transformed my mother's old desktop into a state-of-the-art cyber warfare terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code reflecting in her glasses, as she bypassed the Portland General Hospital's firewall with insulting ease. "Hayes is careful, but he's arrogant," Emma muttered, her eyes locked on the monitor. "He uses a dual-factor authentication system for his private server, but his backup recovery email is tied to his country club membership account. Amateurs, can you get into his financials?" I asked, pacing the length of the storage unit, ignoring the metallic taste of adrenaline and withdrawal in my mouth. "I'm already in," Emma said, a vicious smirk playing on her lips. "He's got a labyrinth of shell companies masking his assets. But money leaves a trail, Dad, even in the Cayman Islands. I'm looking at his consulting ledger right now. Oh my God, he's been paying off 2 hospital administrators for over a decade. Bribes disguised as medical equipment grants. That's how he kept the victims' complaints from ever reaching the medical board." "Download everything," I commanded. "The wire transfers, the IP logs, the encrypted emails. Compile it into a digital ghost packet. When I give the signal, I want that packet transmitted simultaneously to the FBI Cyber Division, the Medical Ethics Board, the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit, and the editorial desks of the top 5 national newspapers." "Done," Emma said, her keystroke sounding like rapid gunfire. "But Dad, once I trigger the mass dump, it's irreversible. His entire life will be radioactive in under 60 seconds. "That is exactly the point." I turned to Sarah, who was surrounded by towering stacks of my mother's physical files, drafting legal documents on her tablet. "How are the injunctions?" "Lethal," Sarah said without looking up. "I've drafted 17 separate civil suits for gross medical malpractice, sexual battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I've also filed emergency ex parte motions to freeze all of his domestic and international assets, citing massive flight risk and ongoing criminal fraud. I've back-channeled the filings to a federal judge I know in Seattle. The moment Emma drops the digital evidence, the judge will sign the freeze orders. Hayes won't be able to buy a cup of coffee, let alone a plane ticket to a non-extradition country." I nodded, feeling a surge of profound, dangerous pride. They were brilliant. They were relentless. They were their grandmother's legacy. "What about Detective Park?" Sarah asked, finally looking up. "We still need local law enforcement to make the physical arrest for the murders. Grandma's evidence is good, but a direct confession would seal it. You know, any defense lawyer worth his retainer will try to claim Grandma fabricated the documents out of paranoia. I am going to get that confession," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "And I am going to make sure Detective Park hears every single word of it." "How?" Emma asked, turning around in her chair. "Hayes isn't going to just confess to a handyman. He's a psychopath, but he's not stupid. No, he's not stupid, but he is a malignant narcissist," I explained, drawing on decades of psychological profiling experience. Narcissists believe they are the smartest people in the room. They believe they are untouchable, and more importantly, they cannot resist the urge to gloat when they think they have completely defeated their enemy. He thinks I am a heavily sedated, grieving idiot. We are going to weaponize his arrogance. I pulled out my cell phone, the cheap, prepaid burner I used for my contracting business. I found Hayes's personal cell number in his medical contact file. I didn't text him. Texts gave people time to think. I called him. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Robert?" Hayes said, his voice dripping with that familiar, patronizing faux sympathy. "I am so glad you called. I've been worried about you. Are you keeping up with your medication?" I forced my voice to sound slurred, hesitant, and thick with confusion. I pitched it a full octave higher, stripping away the command and authority. I became the broken handyman. "Dr. Hayes, Bill, I didn't know who else to call," I stammered, artificially quickening my breathing to simulate panic. I found some things, in a storage unit, my mother's things. Silence on the other end of the line, a heavy, pregnant silence. I could practically hear his sociopathic mind calculating the threat level. What kind of things, Robert? Hayes asked, his voice carefully neutral. Boxes of papers, I said, sounding increasingly distressed. About Margaret, you know, her friend who died? She had all these crazy charts, pictures of you, bank numbers. It doesn't make any sense. Bill, was she losing her mind? Did the heart failure make her delusional? I was handing him the perfect narrative. I was giving him exactly what he wanted. A confused, compliant victim begging for an authority figure to explain away the evidence. Robert, listen to me very carefully, Hayes said, his tone instantly shifting into the authoritative, calming cadence of a medical professional managing a crisis. Catherine was suffering from severe paranoia in her final months. It's a tragic side effect of vascular dementia. Those papers are the delusions of a sick mind. You haven't shown them to anyone else, have you? Sarah or Emma? No, I lied, my voice trembling. The girls went back to the hotel. They think it's just old junk. I didn't want them to see Mom like this. Crazy, you did the right thing, Hayes said, his relief palpable. Listen to me. We need to handle this privately, to protect Catherine's legacy. Bring the papers to me. I can help you sort through what is real and what is dementia. I don't want to come to the clinic, I stammered. People will see, I just want to understand. Of course, Hayes said smoothly. He was taking the bait perfectly. He needed to isolate me. He needed to see exactly what evidence I had. And then, he needed to permanently neutralize the threat. There is an old community center on Burnside Street. It used to be a women's shelter. It's closed for renovations now, completely empty. Meet me there tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Bring everything you found. And Robert, make sure you take your medication before you come. You sound very agitated. Okay, Bill, thank you. Burnside Street, 9. I hung up the phone. The simulated panic instantly vanished from my face, replaced by a cold, predatory calm. The shelter on Burnside Street. It was the exact same building where Margaret Caldwell had volunteered. The exact place where she had first discovered Hayes's crimes. He wasn't just isolating me, he was making a statement. He was returning to the scene of his original sin to tie up the final loose end. He took it, I told my daughters. 9 a.m. tomorrow, the old Burnside shelter. That place is a ghost town, Sarah said, her legal mind assessing the risk. Dad, it's a trap. He's going to try to kill you, just like he killed Grandma and Margaret. I know, I said, pulling my old tactical jacket from the back of a chair. I checked the hidden pockets, my muscle memory flawlessly recalling the weight and balance of combat gear. But a trap is only a trap if you don't know it's there. Sarah, contact Detective Park. Tell him I have a meeting with the prime suspect in his cold case. Tell him to wire me up and put a SWAT team on standby outside the perimeter. But make it absolutely clear to Park. His men do not move in until I give the verbal confirmation. And if Hayes tries to kill you before you get the confession? Emma asked, her voice tight with worry. I walked over to my daughter and placed a steady, untrembling hand on her shoulder. The fog was gone. The JSOC operative was fully online. For 15 years, he has believed I am nothing but a broken man with a hammer. I said softly. Tomorrow he is going to find out exactly what I used to build. Detective James Park of the Portland PD Cold Case Unit looked exactly like a man who had spent 20 years staring into the darkest corners of human nature. We met him at a secure location, an unmarked police garage, at 6 a.m. the next morning. When Sarah handed him a summary file of my mother's evidence, his cynical facade cracked. Your mother built a federal RICO case from a storage unit, Park said in stunned disbelief. This is enough to bury him under the prison. We are reopening Catherine Mitchell's death as a homicide immediately. Thank you, Detective, I said. But first, we are going to get his confession on tape. Park looked at me, taking in my faded jeans and worn work boots. He saw a grieving, blue-collar son, Mr. Mitchell, William Hayes, as suspected serial predator and a double homicide suspect. This meeting at the Burnside shelter is a kill box. I cannot let a civilian walk into that. I didn't raise my voice. I simply let the carefully cultivated, harmless aura of the handyman drop away. I met his eyes with the cold, dead-level stare of a JSOC interrogation specialist. "Detective Park," I said quietly, resonating with absolute authority. "You will wire me. You will position your SWAT element in a 2-block perimeter, out of visual range. You will maintain radio silence on all standard encrypted frequencies. And your men will not breach the structure until I give the verbal code word, resolution." Park froze. The experienced detective instantly recognized the tactical language and the dangerous stillness of a highly trained operative. "Who the hell are you, Mitchell?" "I am a son fulfilling his mother's dying wish," I replied. "Wire me up." By 8:30 a.m. I was driving toward the industrial district. An FBI tech team had fitted me with a covert transmitter and a microcamera. "We have eyes on the target location." Park's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Hayes's silver Mercedes is parked in the rear alley. Tactical teams are in position. Emma and Sarah are in the mobile command center. You are green to go." The old Burnside shelter was a decaying brick structure, the very place Margaret Caldwell had tried to help broken women. Now, it would be where the monster answered for it. I grabbed a cardboard box of fake decoy files. I hunched my shoulders, dragged my feet slightly, and let a faint tremor enter my hands. I was playing the role of a man heavily under the influence of lorazepam. Robert, Dr. William Hayes, stood in what used to be the main office. Wearing a pristine, charcoal gray tailored suit, he looked completely out of place in the ruined building. "Bill," I slurred, clutching the box. "I brought the papers like you asked. My head really hurts today." Hayes smiled, a warm, paternal expression utterly devoid of human empathy. "I know it hurts, Robert. That's the medication. Did you take your pill this morning?" "Yeah," I lied, letting my eyes dart nervously. "Why did Mom have all these papers about you and Margaret?" "Because your mother was a deeply troubled woman." Hayes sighed. "She projected her paranoid fantasies onto me. May I see the box?" I clutched it tighter. "She left a video, Bill. She said Margaret found out you were hurting women." Hayes stopped a few feet away. The paternal smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating mask. He evaluated my slouched posture and trembling hands, calculating the threat level as 0. "Ah," Hayes said softly. "The video your mother played the harmless old lady. Well, I knew she was investigating me. Robert, I've known for months." "Keep him talking," Park's voice whispered in my ear. "Get the confession. If you knew, why didn't you stop her?" I stammered. "I did stop her," Hayes chuckled. "Last week, her heart failure? A simple, untraceable potassium chloride injection during a routine blood draw. Indistinguishable from a natural cardiac event. We got it." Park hissed in my ear. "That's murder one. Pull out." I ignored Park. "And Margaret?" "Did you kill Margaret too?" Hayes sighed. "Margaret threatened to ruin my career over a few overly emotional patients. Yes, I killed Margaret. I sedated her, drove her to Trillium Lake, and let the water do the rest. Just like this is necessary." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a pre-filled medical syringe. The needle glinted in the dusty light. "What is that?" I stammered, dropping the cardboard box. "The exact same thing I gave your mother," Hayes said, stepping forward. "Don't fight it, Robert. The lorazepam in your system is already slowing your heart rate. The police will find you here, a grieving son who suffered a stress-induced heart attack." You drugged me back then too," I slurred, backing into a pillar. "In 1995, I had to," Hayes smiled. "You were going to play the hero and go to the authorities. So I erased your memories. I took a highly trained military operative and turned him into a docile handyman. I owned your mind for 30 years, Robert, and now I'm taking your life." Hayes lunged forward, the syringe aimed directly at my neck. He expected the slow, sluggish reaction of a heavily sedated man. He didn't expect the handyman to vanish, replaced by a JSOC lethal operative operating at peak combat efficiency. I stepped into his attack. My left hand snapped up, locking around his wrist with crushing force. The syringe stopped inches from my jugular. Hayes gasped, his eyes widening in profound shock as he hit the immovable wall of my grip. The slurred speech and trembling evaporated instantly. I straightened to my full height, my eyes burning with decades of suppressed rage. "You made one fatal mistake, Doctor," I said, my voice razor-sharp. "You assumed I took my pill today." Hayes struggled violently, panic flooding his eyes. What are you?" "I am the son of Catherine Mitchell. I said coldly. With a brutal twist of my hips, I applied a joint lock technique. Hayes screamed as the bones in his wrist snapped. The syringe shattered on the concrete. I drove my knee upward into his solar plexus, folding him in half. As he collapsed, gasping for air, I hurled him backward. He crashed into a desk, crumbling to the floor in a whimpering heap. I stood over him, my breathing perfectly controlled. I tapped my earpiece. "Emma, Sarah," I said, my voice echoing in the silent hall. "Burn his life down." 3 miles away, inside the mobile command center, Emma slammed her finger down on the enter key. In that exact fraction of a second, the digital ghost packet deployed. The firewall protecting Dr. William Hayes' darkest secrets evaporated. Within 10 seconds, the FBI Cyber Division received a 500-gigabyte encrypted file containing irrefutable proof of 17 sexual assaults, massive medical fraud, and offshore money laundering. Within 20 seconds, the Medical Ethics Board received the unredacted patient logs. Within 30 seconds, the emergency injunctions Sarah had filed were approved by a federal judge, instantly freezing every single asset tied to Hayes' name. As Hayes lay groaning on the dusty floor of the abandoned shelter, clutching his shattered wrist, his expensive smartphone began to vibrate in his jacket pocket. It buzzed once, twice, then it erupted into a continuous frantic vibration. I reached down, pulled the phone from his pocket, and looked at the screen. Wells Fargo, account frozen due to federal injunction. Alerts, Cayman National Bank Asset Seizure Protocol initiated. Email, Oregon Medical Board, emergency license suspension. News alerts, prominent Portland physician accused of decades of abuse in massive data leak. I turned the screen so Hayes could see it. As the reality of his total destruction registered, the color completely drained from his face. "You didn't just lose your freedom, Doctor," I said, my voice echoing with icy finality. "You lost your legacy, you lost your wealth, you lost your name. My mother spent 29 years building the bomb. I just detonated it." Hayes stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. The arrogant predator was gone. All that remained was a broken, terrified old man who had finally realized he was the prey. "Resolution," I said clearly into my earpiece. Less than 5 seconds later, the world outside exploded. The heavy wooden doors of the Burnside shelter were blown off their hinges by a tactical breaching charge. Flashbangs detonated in the corridor. A 12-man SWAT element flooded into the room. Assault rifles raised, laser sights painting Hayes' chest with red dots. Detective James Park walked in behind them, his gun drawn. "Dr. William Hayes," Park announced, "you are under arrest for the murders of Margaret Caldwell and Catherine Mitchell. You are also under arrest for 17 counts of sexual battery, witness intimidation, and medical fraud." 2 SWAT officers hauled Hayes to his feet, wrenching his broken wrist behind his back to apply the cuffs. Hayes looked back at me as they dragged him toward the door. His eyes were wide, frantic. You were just a handyman," he screamed. "I was whatever I needed to be to keep my family safe," I replied, my voice carrying the lethal weight of my past. "You should have checked my DD-214 before you tried to drug me, Doctor. Unleashing hell is what I do best." They hauled him out into the glaring sunlight, shoving him into the back of a police cruiser. I walked out of the shelter. A few moments later, Emma and Sarah broke through the police perimeter, throwing their arms around me. I held my daughters tight, the last traces of the lorazepam fog completely burning away. I was finally, truly awake. The trial made national headlines for months. Faced with the insurmountable mountain of evidence, the digital footprint Emma had exposed, and the airtight legal trap Sarah had set, Hayes' defense team abandoned him. When he heard the wiretap recording of his own arrogant confession, he broke. He waived his right to a jury trial, attempting to secure a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. There was no deal. The federal judge, reading from Sarah's meticulously drafted victim impact statements, sentenced Dr. William Hayes to 17 consecutive life sentences in a maximum security federal penitentiary, with absolutely no possibility of parole. He would die in a concrete box, stripped of his wealth, his title, and his dignity. 6 months after Hayes was locked away, the autumn leaves were turning a brilliant, fiery orange. Sarah, Emma, and I stood on a quiet, manicured hill in the local cemetery. We had replaced my mother's standard headstone, with a custom-cut slab of black granite. The inscription caught the afternoon sun. Catherine Mitchell. 1940-2024. Mother, protector, private investigator. She fought in the shadows so others could stand in the light. Beside her grave, we planted a young dogwood tree, Margaret Caldwell's favorite flower. It was a living memorial to the friend my mother had sacrificed her peace to avenge. I'm still angry at her, Sarah admitted softly, tracing the letters on the headstone. For keeping all those secrets, for letting Hayes drug you, for carrying all of that darkness by herself for 30 years. I know, I said. I was angry too, but I understand why she did it. Emma wiped a tear. She traded her own peace of mind to guarantee our safety. She stole your memories because she knew if you remembered, you would have fought him. And if you fought him back then, he would have killed you. I looked down at the freshly turned earth. My mother had been brilliant, flawed, fiercely protective, and deeply complicated. She had waged a quiet, decades-long war entirely on her own, knowing that no one would ever thank her. She had protected me in the most painful, sacrificial way possible. Love isn't always gentle. Protection isn't always kind. Sometimes, true love is bearing a crushing burden so that the people you care about never have to feel its weight. I took a deep breath, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. For the first time in 30 years, my mind was entirely my own. The JSOC operative was still there, sharp and lethal, but the handyman remained too. A father who had successfully protected his daughters. Don't let arrogance blind you to the quiet strength of others. And never underestimate a parent's capacity to protect their family. When power corrupts, the truth will eventually, inevitably, find a way to tear down the darkest of empires. If you enjoyed this story of vengeance and unyielding family loyalty, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this audio fiction with someone who appreciates justice. Stay sharp, trust your instincts, and remember, the quietest people in the room are usually the ones you should fear the most.